Have you ever left a conversation and found yourself replaying it in your head hours later? Maybe you're driving home from work and still replaying a conversation you had with a coworker, boss, or a customer. Maybe you've caught yourself standing in the kitchen washing dishes, but also mentally rehashing a disagreement or argument with your partner or a family member from days ago. Or you got a text that seems a little short, a little different than usual, and before you know it, you've constructed this whole story about what the other person meant. And an experience I think we all have that I personally dislike the most is when I'm laying in bed at night and my brain wants to do a full investigation discovery into something I said years ago, and somehow I still feel embarrassed or bothered by it like it just happened that day. Let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome to Torches Yoga and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and I'll be your coach. If you're curious about mindfulness, healing, and practical habits that actually work, you're in the right place. Here, we focus on simple but powerful practices grounded in ancient wisdom and modern science to care for both our mind and body. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. So, I don't know about you, but I find it simultaneously interesting and irritating that our brains like to relive conversations over and over. We replay them, we analyze them, we try to rewrite them, imagining what we should have said or what the other person could or should have said. We try to overanalyze what they meant and how they may have taken what we said. When most of us think about communication, we tend to focus on speaking. We try so hard to find the right words, find the confidence, be assertive, or not too domineering, or trying to be a better listener, maybe. And while all of that is very helpful to a degree, mindful communication begins long before the words even leave our lips. It begins with our awareness. And when it comes to awareness of what we are communicating, that means we are noticing what is happening within us before we ever respond to what is happening around us. And mindful communication matters not just because we need one more thing to get right, but because our conversations shape so much of our daily experiences. They shape our relationships, our sense of connection. They influence how understood we feel and how well we understand others. And it's not just about other people. Our internal conversations shape the relationship we have with ourselves. Before we dive deeper into all of this, I want to circle back to the air element that is woven through everything we've been talking about this month. Traditionally, June is associated with air, and across many traditions, air has been connected with thought, ideas, language, communication, and the movement of the mind. What I love about that symbolism is not that air is constantly moving, it's that communication is too. Our thoughts move, our understanding moves, our perspectives can move, and if we are paying attention to life, then they should be moving and not stagnant. Because, like I say, mindfulness isn't about arriving at some final version of ourselves and forevermore staying like that. It's about remaining aware enough so we can continue learning, which gives us opportunities to change and grow. I think that's something that's easy for us to forget. Somewhere along the way, we picked up the idea that consistency means holding the exact same opinions, perspectives, and beliefs forever. One thing that instantly can make me cringe is when someone says, "We've always done it this way," or "This is just how I've always been." There's this pressure to defend positions that are probably outgrown, or to still justify things we may have once believed but don't feel so convicted about anymore. It's like there's this pressure to remain loyal to a previous version of ourselves even when life has taught us something new. But mindfulness asks something different. It asks us to pay attention. And if we are genuinely paying attention, it would be strange if awareness didn't change us along the way. Like, think about who you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even just last year. Most of us have learned things, experienced things, lost things, or discovered things. We've had conversations that changed our understanding, encountered perspectives we hadn't considered before, and we've gained insights through our successes and mistakes. And if all of that has happened, why would we expect our understanding to remain exactly the same? Sometimes growth looks like learning a new skill, sometimes it's changing a habit, and sometimes it looks like having the courage to say, I see things differently now. And that isn't weakness or inconsistency, it's accountability in action. Accountability doesn't mean we have to stay stuck in the old or original thoughts, ideas, and perspectives we developed. It's about being honest and acknowledging what we've learned. It's about communicating from where we genuinely are instead of where we think we're supposed to be or where we came from. But our communication isn't only influenced by our thoughts and beliefs, it's also influenced by our nervous system. Have you ever noticed that the exact same comment can land completely different depending on the kind of day you're having? Like on a day where we're well rested, grounded, and feeling secure, someone might offer feedback and we will genuinely consider it. We may not fully agree with it, but we're able to hear it with an openness and curiosity. But on a day where we're exhausted, overwhelmed, stressed, or already carrying emotional weight, that exact same comment can feel completely different. Now, it's a personal and it's like criticism, like a personal attack. Then we get defensive. The words of the comment may not be any different, but it's just the state we were receiving them from. This is why mindful communication is about so much more than learning what to say and when. It's about learning to notice what is happening within us as communication unfolds, because many conversations with others aren't just an exchange of information, they're exchanges between nervous systems. When we feel safe, curiosity tends to become more available. And when we feel threatened, protection tends to take over. We've all experienced that moment where someone is talking to us and we're technically listening, but internally, we are already building our response in our heads. We start picking out pieces of what they're saying to turn it into evidence, or we're preparing our defense, and we're already deciding why they're wrong before they even finish their sentence. And it's not like we do this just to be difficult. We do it because something inside us feels challenged or exposed, uncertain or unsafe. And mindfulness asks us to notice those movements not so we can judge them or ourselves, but just to notice them so we can be aware of what we are bringing into the conversation. Because it's that awareness that gives us a choice of how we are going to engage or respond instead of just letting our old patterns and defenses take over. The moment we notice ourselves becoming reactive, we create the possibility of responding differently. Maybe that means we take a breath, ask a question, or maybe if we pause for just a beat, we can see if we are making an assumption. And that pause can even help us to recognize that maybe we're too activated right now to have the conversation productively, and we can choose to step away and come back to it with a little more calm and clarity. That pause may seem small, but more often than not, it changes everything. Sometimes peace arrives the moment we stop trying to control the outcome of a conversation. When we bring mindfulness into our conversations with others, we are way less likely to be rehashing it later that night, next week, next month, or next year, especially when it comes to those difficult conversations. If our words don't cause ourselves or others more stress or discourse, if we're not adding to a problem, then our brains will feel a sense of completion. If there's conflict, whether it's between us and whoever we are talking to, or just internally, because maybe our words don't align with our preferences, boundaries, or values. But if there is conflict, the brain essentially wants to keep that tab open and find a way to resolve it. And even worse, the brain kind of thinks it's solving the matter by replaying or rewriting it. But really, it's just reinforcing our limiting beliefs, our old patterns, and justifying emotions instead of working through them. The more we replay it, the more we unknowingly take that energy into our future conversations and relationships. Sometimes in difficult conversations, we have to ask ourselves the hard question. Am I really trying to find resolution here? Or am I trying to control how this conversation unfolds? Am I trying to be right? because those are really the same thing. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, mindful communication isn't just about our interactions with others. It is deeply connected to the relationship we have with ourselves. Some of our most impactful conversations aren't happening out there, they're happening internally. Many of us are still having conversations with old versions of ourselves. We're still arguing with mistakes we made years ago, defending choices we've already learned from, or criticizing ourselves for things we would have forgiven someone else for already. We hold ourselves hostage to old words, opinions, misunderstandings, or old identities. And when we do that, we leave very little room for growth. If a friend came to us and said, I've learned something new and I see things differently now, most of us would celebrate that growth with them. We would encourage and support them. But we're not so nice to ourselves. We often demand that we remain exactly the same, like changing our mind somehow invalidates who we used to be. But growth doesn't erase the past, it builds on it. The person we were yesterday isn't our enemy. That version is part of how we arrived here today. And it goes beyond how we think about our past or our past experiences. It also includes paying attention to how we speak to ourselves every single day. Whether we realize it or not, most of us are carrying on internal conversations from the moment we wake up until the moment we fall asleep. We narrate our experiences, interpret our mistakes, evaluate our performance, and are quietly deciding what we are and aren't capable of. And those words matter. Not because every negative thought becomes reality, but because the stories we repeat often become the lens that we see ourselves through. We make a mistake and immediately tell ourselves, I always mess up. We consider trying something new and hear an inner voice say, you're not qualified enough. We receive constructive feedback and somehow our brain translates that into, I'm not good enough. Or we accomplish something meaningful and immediately dismiss it by telling ourselves it wasn't that big of a deal, anyone could have done it, or it just doesn't really matter. The interesting thing is that many of these thoughts happen so automatically that we don't even notice them anymore. They're just familiar. And familiar thoughts can sound like facts because we've rehearsed them for so long, they're just ingrained in us. That's where mindfulness becomes so valuable. Awareness of these habitual thought patterns gives us an opportunity to hear what we've been saying to ourselves all along. We start to notice when we're being our own harshest critic and when we're talking ourselves out of opportunities before we've even given ourselves a chance. We begin to notice when we're defining ourselves by a mistake, a fear, or an old story rather than who we are today. Once we notice those patterns, we don't have to believe every single thought that passes through our minds. We can engage it, question it, or redirect it. That doesn't mean we replace every difficult thought with just blind positivity. If we make a mistake, mindfulness isn't asking us to pretend everything went perfectly. It's asking us to respond honestly and compassionately. Instead of saying, I failed, we ask, what did I learn from this? Instead of saying, I'm just terrible at this, we can acknowledge that maybe I'm still learning. When we approach the inner dialogue after something didn't work out as it planned it to, now instead of focusing on what didn't work, we can intentionally notice what did. What strength did we bring to the situation? What effort did we make? And what lessons are we carrying forward? I think when we talk about growth, we instantly jump to thinking about the areas that we deem as needing improvement. But it's not just about recognizing where we struggle. It's also about recognizing where we're succeeding, where we're learning, and where we're still becoming. Now, awareness alone isn't going to transform our confidence overnight. It's not going to be a magic eraser on our self-doubt or change the years of conditioning or criticism. But every time we notice our internal dialogue and choose to engage with it intentionally, rather than letting it run unchecked, we strengthen our self-trust. And that is major. That is the hard work. We begin building confidence that we are capable of responding to our thoughts rather than being controlled by them. And over time, we start seeing ourselves as a little more clearly, not through a lens of our fears or our harshest judgments, but just a clean lens of awareness. For me, mindful internal communication is my love language to myself. It's an act of self care rooted in reality and not just delusional fluff. All right, friend. Mindful communication invites us to extend understanding both outward and inward. It invites us to communicate with others from a place of curiosity rather than certainty. And it invites us to communicate with ourselves from a place of compassion rather than judgment. June is often associated with growth, and that can show up in our communication, in the questions we ask, our willingness to listen, and our ability to pause before we react. Sometimes it's showing up in our capacity to hear a different perspective without immediately feeling threatened by it. And sometimes it's our willingness to acknowledge that we've changed. I think one of the clearest signs of growth isn't when you all of a sudden have all the answers. It's that we are willing to remain open to new ones. Mindful communication isn't about saying the right things or never getting emotional or never making a mistake. It's bringing awareness into the conversations that are already happening. Because why? That's right. Awareness always brings her bestie choice. If you're open to sharing, let me know if how you would rate your inner dialogue on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being your own biggest critic and 10 your own biggest cheerleader. Friend, thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.